Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. Duane the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would find myself stationed on a moon in an undisclosed location within multi-dimensional creation. The moon, although barren and devoid of life, would serve, however, as a base of operations for a particular species, a species that were relatively similar appearance-wise to the human body form. What set these humanoids apart from humanity, however, was that they were far more technologically orientated as a species. Although it can be said that the technology as a featuring in the human public domain and accessible to your average human slave is far more rudimentary than that which actually is available. The controllers, the dark force reptilians that oversee humanity's continued subjugation, boast a technology that their human slaves are not privy to. The humanoids, in this real side experience, were technological to the extent of being a space-faring species, and so were not limited to their home planet, at liberty to traverse the stars and explore beyond their planet and indeed a system of origin. There would be no indication that they were in any way under the control of the dark force reptilians, or had much by way of dealings or altercation with them, a rarity in this simulator to be sure. For the reptilians have nigh on conquered the vast multi-dimensional layout of creation, and where they haven't, so they seek to expand into these as yet uncontrolled areas and dimensions, and if those that dwell there are unable to be conquered or unwilling, so expected is it that war will ensue. This rather suggested that for whatever reason the reptilians hadn't elected to invade the particular region of creation the humanoids existed within, or perhaps were at this time unwilling, that maybe it was militarily and strategically disadvantageous to do so at this moment, or maybe the reptilians were unable to reach the dimension the humanoids resided in, or even perhaps were unaware of its existence. For I have had a number of real-side experiences where I have shared the reality of species operating in positions that are rendered in some way inaccessible from all other creational dimensions, and only able to be accessed through certain consciousness-decided and effected means and mechanisms. And some of such dimensions are not only unable to be accessed, but somewhat lost and forgotten in the mists of time, so to say, that no current knowledge of their existence and that which resides within them is in circulation. Regardless, the humanoids had established themselves on a moon, as I mentioned, and upon which they had constructed an elaborate and sophisticated base from where they could operate, for whatever reasons they had for doing so. Whatever functions such a base served, it was however being utilized as a place of meeting, where representatives of other and assorted species would be invited and congregate with the humanoids for the purposes of peace negotiations. For although the humanoids were not having reptilian-related entanglements, through their desire to explore and continuously expand the range of their space exploration, inevitably had they encountered other species, a number of which would not boast a level of technology that they posed as a threat, and where the humanoids would simply study and, where possible, interact and engage. The humanoids could quite readily have then dominated the species they found that were of a lesser technological standing, but this was not their inclination. They were more along the lines of explorers, as I said. However, as they persisted, as they delved ever further with their space fleets into uncharted territory, they would encounter other technological-orientated species, some of which with a technology equivalent to their own. Paul Twitchell always would refer to a creation as a warring realm, as this is the general inclination, the drive and compulsion that is a consciousness. For as individuals and species not only embrace the creation, the secondary personal self and consciousness, but also the consideration that their creation is that which they are, whereas in reality it is simply a tool for the real awareness to utilize for the recognizing of the all-is through the comparison it provides, as creation presents the illusion of apartness, of segregation and isolation of ideas and body forms, so to embrace the creation rather instills the consideration of separation, a notorious breeding ground for distortion of ideas, such as competition, etc. Only through the realization of the isness everything reality animating through all consciousness-affected body types, even with the simulated illusion of idea and form differentiation, can the recognition, and indeed the compulsion, be that of a supporting of all life mentality, and where the battling and destroying of others for what we desire wouldn't even be a consideration. For after all, in a cause and effect simulator, as we each have the creational mechanics to generate whatever causes we desire, unnecessary must it be to compete for our wants. We have but simply to create the ideas, apply the requisite focus, go about the steps required, if indeed any steps are needed, all according to consciousness and what has been decided in regards to that which we seek, and manifested will be our desires. But as I said, with the vast bulk of beings in the simulator still being overwhelmingly consciousness and personal self immersed, their perspective will be limited accordingly, absent of the bigger picture, that of the essence of life, supporting all life that we each are, and as a species come into a conjunction, invariably will be expected conflict and altercation. In the case of the humanoid explorers, they would indeed encounter other technologically orientated species, and although the humanoids lacked compulsion where domination over others was concerned, some of the species they encountered would be opposed to their presence, and the humanoids were not beyond defending themselves where necessary. They had the capability, and in reality it was they who had encroached into the territory of others. The exploration of the humanoids then had them embroiled in various conflicts as a consequence. But as war or domination wasn't the general inclination of the humanoids, so they were more than willing to broker any negotiation possible or made available that could ease the tensions that had been made manifest with other species. And the moon, featuring in this experience, was serving this function seemingly, suggesting it was positioned perhaps within a neutral area of creation, aside from any of the involved species' territorial claims, and where negotiations for peace were taking place within the base built upon it. As I said, periodically would there be gatherings of assorted body forms, each representing their respective species that had come into a conflict with the humanoids. Overall, negotiations were presented and accepted, peace established, but for one particular species that would have the appearance of a kind of a bulky ape. The representative of this species also present was rather uncooperative, and it fell upon him as to the overall decision of his species, as to if they would accept a peace or continue to conflict with the humanoids. Up until this moment I had been observing all that had been transpiring, and receiving all impressions as to the backstory of what was being visually presented as I have just laid out. The real awareness is a part of the isness everything reality that animates through all consciousness affected form and feature, every idea affecting as a simulated circumstance will be available to the real awareness, and can be afforded via impressions to the personal self. At any moment, in any real-side experience, we can receive as though a rapid download that sheds illumination on everything transpiring in our midst. In this case, information that couldn't be determined based on what I was visually presented with, as though I had walked into the movie theatre late and was afforded all the scenes that had preceded my entrance. As I mentioned, animating through all body forms is this same isness reality. In actuality, then, we all are this same reality, but from the perspective of the personal self, would there seem to be segregation that to the isolated personal self, the differentiation of a form and consciousness design indicates a separation and individuality. We can, in fact, then, view through the eyes of any body type throughout creation, just as we might view through the various body type vehicle apparatus that we each possess, for as I said, this becomes possible when we are operating from the real awareness, isness everything position, that which animates through all consciousness-affected body forms. On occasion, I may mimic the forms of certain species for the various assignments that require such a subterfuge, but what also is possible is that we not only can view through the eyes of an alternative body form and have revealed that which is transpiring within its experience, but can take control of the body type for the purposes of certain assignments or objectives. Again, this wouldn't be a case of a possession as a relatable reference. This would be the real awareness, isness, everything that animates through all body forms, taking direct control of what is in reality one of its endless creations in such circumstances where it makes sense to do so. And seemingly was it imperative that peace be established between all species involved, those present within the humanoid's established moon base. Very likely this would have galactic project implications, the kind of projects benefiting all in the simulator, but that couldn't be implemented and involving these particular species until that which was serving as distraction from such projects which benefit awareness and life, the conflict existing between these species was resolved. Hence the necessity of real awareness isness taking direct control of one of its body forms, in this case the rather stubborn representative of the ape-like species. And I was then the view of this situation as my real awareness was taking the reins of the ape creature's actions and ensuring peaceful negotiations were indeed established. From my perspective then, I was the ape creature for the rest of the experience's duration. Interestingly, among those gathered in the moon base, the various and assorted body forms and the humanoids would be present Jean-Luc Picard, the captain of the Enterprise, as played by the actor Patrick Stewart in the second generation of the series Star Trek. On a number of previous real-side experiences I have shared, where Jean-Luc has featured in his iconic Star Trek uniform, impressions would reveal that he was a real guide assuming this form, and this situation would be no different. The guide, in Captain Picard's form, would be unseen by all in attendance but for myself, or rather by the ape form I was currently animating, as though he were watching over the proceedings, perhaps ready to step in and assist where required, even if it was only for advice. As it transpired, not only were peaceful negotiations established now between the ape species and the humanoids, but there had been another species that the humanoids had also infuriated as they encroached into their territory as they went about their space exploration. This other species were similar in appearance to the ape species, though much larger, their body types more robust, as though their forms were more comprising of a stone or rock-like material. These stone beings were adamantly opposed to even considering a peace. They would not even entertain the prospect of sending a representative to the negotiating table. However, they had a close relationship with the ape beings, as though they were a species, genetic offshoot of them, the equivalent of, say, tigers and lions, different species, but of the same feline group, etc. And as I animated the ape species representative to establish a peace between its kind and the humanoids, additionally, I could now be instrumental in approaching the stone beings and encouraging them to do likewise, as the ape beings were the only species trusted by the stone species. I would remove myself to a particular area of the moon, the guide in Picard's form accompanying me, and would proceed to enter a series of caverns that led me deeper underground beneath the moon's surface. At a certain point, so I would as though telepathically connect with the stone beings, as evidently this was an ability the ape beings possessed and in association with the stone species. Emerging from the ground would be several of the stone creatures, for as it transpired, they not only had telepathic capability, but due to the unique design of their consciousness-affected body types, that being more rock-like, so they could forge a kind of link or connection with any medium that was of the same or similar atomic composition of their bodies, and transport themselves accordingly. They could effectively relocate themselves anywhere, any planetary body where rock featured. They would do so here, content to engage with one of the ape species that they considered their kin, a number of those representing their species' interests emerging from the very rocky ground, as I said, transported from wherever was their home world, and I would be successful in affording them the assurances they required that they were agreeable to cease their conflict with the humanoids. And so it was that all tensions and hostilities as harboured between all the species involved was resolved, impressions suggesting, as I said, that with this resolution, so these various and assorted species could bring their technological capabilities to bear, and be willing to now channel their focus and energies into assisting the guides and Duane with life and awareness beneficial multi-dimensional projects. As an additional bonus, the rock species representatives would introduce the humanoids to another species, one that was known to the rock beings, but that which the humanoids had never encountered before or even been aware of. They were a curious breed, as they appeared to be walking skeletons, though completely encased in space suits of a kind. This seemed to be a permanent solution for what were very vulnerable and poorly designed body types, as though they required to constantly wear what were in actuality suits that afforded life support for their skeleton body forms. These were simply the body types as effected from their species' particular designed consciousness, whatever species decisions, life choices, and idea installation accordingly that had resulted in their body forms being of such a design that demanded the use of life-supporting suits. It's possible their skeleton forms were perhaps more metallic, mechanical, as opposed to a biological bone, that they were maybe a form of robotic species, as I would be reminded of the Terminator movies, where the bipedal, more humanoid robot Terminators had rather the appearance of metallic skeletons. But regardless, they also were a technological-based species, and were being brought into the equation to also agreeably venture their assistance in regards to the galactic projects, and there the experience would end.
It always sounds like there's more to do and to get through, etc. But fortunately, all life is awareness. And it's not these things that are taking place. These are just things taking place And just like the good guys, the bad guys, the reptilians, whatever, space types, humans, what have you, they're struggling to recognize what all life is. It's awareness. And so this is the process they're going through too. Yeah, it's just an ongoing process. And so, like the idea there, okay, we all get together, we have peace. All right. So there's an old story about this. I won't get into it, but the idea is that it's kind of like in the old days when we grew up in the 60s, where the Russians and the Americans sit at the table and go, look, the Americans say, well, we want peace. And the Russians say, well, we want peace too. And we want a piece of this country. We want a piece of this country. We want a piece of this country. We want peace too. Okay. So again, while in creation, everybody has their idea of peace, don't they? And, it's humorous what Paul would say. He said, peace is not truth. He said that. I remember he stated that because people think that, oh, I'll just be, peaceful, etc. And, that's my truth, etc. But that's really not it. And truth is not it. I just wrote an image, the difference between what truth and all life is, because everybody has their own truth and people are after the truth. Yeah. Yeah. But it's not really peace that people are seeking. They want to be okay, really, and have their space, etc. So it's not really about peace, is it? It's about something else, but it's something unseen. So in the meantime, yes, we have these Star Trek-like adventures that we're going through and having to deal with, but it's all about how you see it. And it is the wake up. It's the little steps that it takes to recognize this reality more so than the ideas of it. That becomes the difference. And so I really like the process that I went through to gain this view, to be able to present this to where, we went through the gods and the saviors and the angels and the heavens and the masters and gurus and the doctrines, the ceremonies, rituals, traditions, all these things, ancient wisdom, whatever. And no, we don't need any of that because it's an isness. It already is. And you just simply learn to recognize it. And this is where we are. And we're having fun helping each other, recognizing it while we're going on our adventures, while we're doing something.